Hello, my name is Bob Barker with Barker Gilmore, and thanks for joining us today. Today's webinar is part of our GC Advantage program. It's our professional development program for corporate legal and compliance leaders. And today's webinar, the title is, it's a long one. It's Succeeding as a Great Lawyer, Savvy Business Person, and Indispensable Teammate. So hopefully we look forward to sharing a lot of insights today with you and have some good takeaways from today. Today you'll hear from three very successful general counsel and what their paths have been to success. We also have a library of previous webinars as our on-demand library, and you can view those. We've got the full video, we have audio for people who just want to maybe listen to the audio while they're traveling. If there's any slides or any other material, those are included as well. Today's event is also being recorded and will be added to the library in about 3 to 4 weeks. An email will also be sent to everyone who's registered once this material is available. During the webinar, please submit any questions you have. Keep this fairly interactive. We're probably all pretty experienced Zoom users now, and that there's a Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen, and you can submit your questions there. And if you have a question, take a look at the questions that have already been submitted. If you've got the same question, feel free to click the thumbs up, and so the panelists will know that it's a popular question. And we'll do our best to answer as many questions during today's event as possible. And if you have any technical issues, feel free to use the chat feature to communicate with the support team. At this point, I'll turn it over to A.B. Cruz.
Bob, thank you very much. And thank you to Taylor Powers as well, who's really worked hard behind the scenes to put this webinar together. Welcome, everyone. We can't see you, but we know you're out there, so welcome and thank you for attending. As Bob said, it is a mouthful in terms of our title. Succeeding as a great lawyer, savvy business person, and indispensable teammate, the in-house counsel imperative. Yes, a lot, but I think it really captures, at least at a high level, what is expected or required for an in-house attorney to be able to progress in his or her career as a corporate counsel with aspiration to become a GC or chief legal officer. To put a finer point on this challenge, let me just highlight a recent study that said, and it was done by Barker Gilmore with Chief Executive Group. It said that 70% of CEOs describe their ideal GC as one who acts as a strategic business partner and is a valued member of the leadership team. However, although the GC role is viewed in most cases as an integral member of the executive leadership team, a majority of CEOs surveyed feel their GCs are falling short when it comes to their actually being a contributing strategic business partner. The report's finding indicates that CEOs want their GCs to step up, raise their game, and add greater value to the senior management team dynamic. So as I see it, it's somewhat of a call to action for not only standing GCs, but also those who aspire to be GCs. So it's abundantly clear that you do need to be a great lawyer, always a great lawyer, but also a capable business person, business partner, and a loyal and trusted teammate. And I always put an asterisk by that loyal and trusted teammate, simply because there can be times where there needs to be a limit to how, to that teammate relationship because of your duties and responsibilities ethically from a regulation standpoint. because we're lawyers. And so hopefully we'll touch on that today. So to help flesh out what I am calling this call to action, and to kind of bring it down to practical, meaningful, and more precise terms, we're privileged to have with us two standing and outstanding GCs. And indeed, both our panelists are in their second GC stints at their young ages. They are in their second GC stints. That alone, I think, is remarkable. But what is personally most exciting to me is that I had the privilege of working with our two panelists at two different companies. Back then, and during the course of getting to know them, I knew at some point that they were going to become successful GCs, which they have, for public companies, which is a major feat. But that doesn't happen overnight. It takes intention, it takes being purposeful, and it takes, frankly, a team to make that happen. So let me quickly introduce our two panelists with us, our guests. Mary Talbot is the Chief Legal Officer and Secretary at Gravity Diagnostics in Kentucky. Before that, she was the Senior Vice President, General Counsel, and Secretary at Tennant Company in Minnesota. She also worked in the legal departments at General Cable Corp, Macy's Inc., Cincinnati Bell, but most importantly, as I referenced earlier, from 2006, I believe, to 2012, Mary and I were colleagues at the EW Scripps Company, and then at Scripps Networks Interactive. We split the company in 2008, and she and I went to S&I. Welcome, Mary, and as always, it's wonderful to see you. Our other special guest is Shantae Mitchell. Shantae is currently the Executive Vice President, GC, and Secretary of Zogenix in Seattle. Before that, she was a Senior Vice President and General Counsel and Corporate Affairs for Aptivo Therapeutics, also headquartered in Seattle. Most importantly, again, selfishly to me, is that Shantae and I worked together from 2013 to 2015 at Emergent Biosolutions in Maryland. In fact, her office in our new building was right across from me, so she knows me pretty well. Welcome, Shantae. It's really great to see your smiling face on the screen, and I know you're on the left coast there, but it's darn good to see you. So let's jump in and into the questions and answers that I've got here. We'll start easy, and then we'll pick it up quickly and get to the heart of the discussion. First question, Shantae and Mary, both of you transitioned to your new GC roles just this year or within recent months. Why don't you take a moment to talk to the folks that are listening in and watching about your current jobs, and hopefully they're exciting for you, but also touch on your last job and what you did, and perhaps how you well, not so much how you, we'll talk about how you got to those jobs, but talk about those roles. I think it's important because your first roles were both public company, first GC jobs, and I think that's pretty astounding news in itself. So with that, Shantae, do you mind taking that up first?
Yeah, sure. So currently I'm at Zogenix Inc. in the Bay. We are a pharmaceutical company that has recently launched a product called Fintebla that is indicated for early onset children with Dravet syndrome, which is a really kind of debilitating, disastrous, quite frankly, rare epilepsy that has an early onset in kids. And then we're a rare disease company, meaning we focus on developing products that will have a substantial impact in the area of rare diseases and in serving unmet needs in various populations. I'm the Executive Vice President, General Counsel, and Secretary. So I run the secretarial function. I oversee the legal affairs group, which includes compliance, general corporate legal, and intellectual property. We have locations here in the US as well as in the EU, in the UK. And so I oversee, or I'm building a legal team. I'm the first general counsel. So I'm building a legal team that is international and that can manage and help to provide guidance to a company that is about to start selling products all over the world, quite frankly. I started in April in the pandemic. And so that has been an interesting challenge. And I came from Aptivo Therapeutics, which was a spinoff of Emergent Biosolutions. And I was at Aptivo for 4 years. And we'll get into that later, but AB was instrumental in helping me get that role as well. It's also a publicly traded company in the biotech space, developing products and product candidates to address cancer.
Thanks, Shantae. It sounds like you might be hiring, so there may be some ears that perked up when you said that. So that's all good. That's all good. Mary, how about you? A little bit about your current job and maybe your last.
Sure. My current job, I'm Chief Legal Officer and Secretary at Gravity Diagnostics in Covington, Kentucky, right across the bridge from downtown Cincinnati. I've been here since September, and what we do, it's a clinical lab. We're licensed in all 50 states, but obviously with the pandemic, we have focused pretty much exclusively on COVID testing since probably, I guess, March. We were able to get approval from the FDA to do our testing. And so we have done over 1 million samples and are working with names that you're probably familiar with, Kroger, Procter & Gamble, things of that nature. And so we are spending a lot of time just trying to help with the overflow testing requirements nationally that are needed. And so 6 years ago, this company started. As of about February, I think last year's revenue was $5 million with 30 employees. We are up to 400 employees, and I think it was just published in the paper. Revenues were in October, probably 87 million, but it's just skyrocketing. But we also, our bread and butter before that had been toxicology and pharmacogenetics, where you actually would be able to check to see what medicines are appropriate for patients, so you can make sure that when you are prescribed medications, that how you metabolize medications and you're getting the right medication for your particular makeup. And so that's where we are, but we decided to shift gears because we anticipated that there would be a great need. And the CEO is like, go for it. And so he wanted to actually make a difference and be able to support the community. And so that's where we are. I landed here because we have grown tremendously. And obviously with the explosion in growth, there's a lot of interest in this organization and aspirations to be something bigger than just a clinical lab. And so they brought me in because of my public company experience, in case we would have the good fortune of being able to make something of this. So no one else here has that. And we're building out a team. I'm the most senior legal person and the lowest level legal person here right now. But it's very interesting and very fun. I came from Tennant Company in Minneapolis, where I was in my first GC role there. It was an international manufacturing company where we did commercial and industrial floor sweepers. So it's the Tennant sweeper that you may see at airports. In Walmart, our latest and greatest invention was the autonomous floor sweeper and scrubber that we were using for Walmart was our biggest partner. And so we were manufacturing all over the world. And I was brought in there to basically reorganize and adjust the legal department as we were making some changes in the structure and the long-term strategy of the organization. So I was there for about 1.5 years and learned a lot of interesting things as a GC in my first GC role.
Thanks, Mary. And so just so the audience has a little context here, so Mary's kind of back home. She just moved back, having moved to my birthplace, Minneapolis, where she was GC up there, and then and moved back down. In fact, as you look over Mary's shoulder, you can see, I think, our you can almost see our old office building where we worked together at Scripps. And
And
you
I,
can actually see the actual office. I think it was on the 17th floor. So she is literally back home, and it's good to see Cincinnati in your background. I lived on the Cincinnati side. Mary lived on Kentucky side. It always made for good banter.
still does.
It still does. Thanks, Mary. Okay. I realize that we probably have some folks in the audience that are in law firms. And so I thought, both of you, all of us started off in law firms. And so I thought it might be worthwhile. I think, Mary, you were with 2 law firms, and I think, Shantae, you were with Ropes and Gray, as I recall. Why don't you talk about that moment or that transition? And maybe and I don't know, I haven't heard these stories from you before, I don't think. But what prompted the transition from outside counsel, or from law firm to in-house? Shantae, you want to pick that up?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I was at Ropes and Gray. I was there for 5 years. I was in the DC office at the time. It was largely a Boston-based firm, and they had made some acquisitions in some other cities, but at the time it was largely Boston. But I worked in DC, and they were very kind and let me do all kinds of interesting things. I came in as a healthcare lawyer, healthcare FDA regulatory lawyer, and then realized, wow, I was really interested in doing all kinds of other things. So I did, private equity work, debt finance work, venture capital work. But at the time, Ropes was largely a private equity shop. And around 2008, it was tough to be at a private equity shop because, the market fell apart. And so it was the time for me to kind of assess and decide, what did I want to do? I knew that partnership was not for me. I saw the people who were serving as partners, working as partners, and they were brilliant people. But it just didn't feel like that was the right fit for me in terms of lifestyle and what was required, and generating business and all of those, having a book and all that kind of stuff. And so I started looking at what my other options were. And around that time, Emergent Biosolutions was looking for an M&A counsel. It was a company that had a strategy of growth by acquisitions. And I thought, wow, this could be a really good fit for me, because it is a specialty pharma company, which was right in my wheelhouse. It had a product that was selling, again, right in my wheelhouse. And then it also, was looking to do some M&A work. And I really liked the M&A work that I was doing at the firm at Ropes and Gray. And so I decided to proceed with trying to see if I can move. And thankfully I was given an offer and left to go to Emergent. And it was, kind of the best decision I ever made, quite frankly.
Wow. Great. Thank you, Shantae. Mary, how about your transition from law firm to in-house?
Yeah, I was in a very small plaintiff admiralty and maritime law firm for about 5 years. And then I decided I needed some bigger or a more regional law firm experience. So I did that for 18 months and 11 days. And I was doing medical malpractice, insurance defense. And obviously, since I knew the exact number of days, you can probably understand that was probably not the best fit. It was all litigation. I never wanted to be a litigator, but that's all I had done my entire private practice career. I would like to say I was very purposeful and intentional on the transition into in-house corporate roles, but I actually was applying to anything and everything just to try to escape from that current situation. And I got a call from a blind ad that I applied to from Cincinnati Bell. And I went, looked at the job description, and the only thing that I had that they needed was a law degree. And I did not have any skill set. Long story short, they ended up hiring me. I have no idea why. And we still laugh about it to this day, because they had no business hiring me for that role. But I went in and, worked hard and tried to learn. And that was basically my intro into corporate law. And I just wanted to change, and I jumped because I thought this is different and it's escape. And it did really change my life. And we'll get into it. But then I met people like A.B. Cruz, who changed the trajectory of my career. So
Thanks so much, Mary. And it kind of reminds me of my transition. I was working at a law firm. It was my 4th law firm. In fact, we had developed a a partner and I had developed a great practice, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, I got a call from Black Entertainment Television. I knew the GC there, and I had met Bob Johnson, the founder, and Deborah Lee, the president at Black Entertainment Television. And so I thought they wanted to hire the law firm. So I strolled over, or I went from Northwest DC to Northeast DC, carrying a bunch of brochures and cards of mine. And I was strutting in there, and Bob Johnson, Deborah Lee, and Byron Marchand, the GC, all kind of laughed at me because they said, no, we don't want to hire your firm. We already have them on retainer. We want to hire you. Now, I had always thought that I would eventually move in-house. And I thought that was, I kind of like having, a single client, so to speak. But I never took any initiative to do it because we had a great practice going. And so when I got that call, I went over there, and lo and behold, I visited them I think it was November, and within a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, I found myself working at Black Entertainment Television, right before December of 1999. So it was one of those things where I had intention, but I never acted on it until that moment. So it kind of reminds me a little bit of what you shared. Okay, well, thanks for that. A little historical perspective on your start of your careers and where you are now. Let's fill in the middle gap, okay? Because this is where we know, that's where we know each other. This is where, we had to strategize on things. We made mistakes along the way, but I think we got more hits than strikeouts, I think, and in all said and done. So let's get into the meat of the discussion. Specifically, let's talk about our respective times working together and what we did to advance each of you professionally, and frankly, me professionally, and to prepare you to be a GC. I know we were talking before everybody joined the call about the lessons learned that I've accumulated, a list of lessons learned over the years. A lot of them were formed working with these two great people. And we can talk, and this is going to be, for you, it's payback time. I want you to share with me and the audience anything you want to. I mean, there are all kinds of things that come to mind when you talk about being intentional and purposeful on if you see talent and potential in someone who has a passion, same passion for what you do, you bring them along. But it's more than just bring them along. There are such things as mentoring, formal and informal, performance review processes, development plan, individual development plans, succession planning, executive and career coaching, exposure to the C-suite and the board, soft skills, right? Not only business skills, but soft skills development, advocacy and sponsorship, which is needed within any organization for a person to move up. Role expansion, you start here, where do you go next? And community involvement, it's all about being a player, not only at your company, but in, whether it be Seattle or Cincinnati or Covington. So, but Mary, you came to Scripps in 2006, as I think I brought you in as an associate general counsel. I think you were my second executive hire at EW Scripps. And then in the 6.5 years we worked together, you earned a number of promotions, a lot of role expansions. Why don't you share with our audience how you came to Scripps, which is a great story in itself, by the way, and you're welcome to share that. And then share with folks how we advanced for you, the 3 critical factors. And I know you've heard this before because Ivan Fong up at 3M in Minneapolis, but he always talks about the PI, performance, image, and exposure. Why that's key for anyone who wants to move from here to there. So Mary, why don't you start off this discussion and talk about our time together.
Okay. It was actually 2005, and I was interested in maybe exploring a different position after Cincinnati Bell had been so gracious to me and hired me when they shouldn't have. And so I was thinking about other companies that I might be interested in the Cincinnati area. E.W. Scripps Company, obviously having an incredible reputation for being a very good company, both from a performance standpoint, but also just ethically, something that was very important to me. And so I didn't know anything about the legal department. And so I made a cold call to the general counsel of the E.W. Scripps Company and got his voicemail and left a message and said, "Hi, this is Mary, and I would like to know more about your legal department if you would ever call me back." Click, thinking I'll never hear from this guy. And sure enough, within probably a few hours, I get a call back from A.B. Cruz. And that started a relationship where he's like, "Yeah, I'll get together and meet with you." And we started having lunch every couple of months. And he was very forthcoming initially and said, "Mary, I don't have anything right now. I'm building out the department, but, I'd be glad to talk with you." And so it was an opportunity, if nothing else, for me to just have another person in the legal community that I could learn from. And so I think fast forward maybe 9-10 months, I got a call from AB that he's looking to hire, wanted to know if I would still be interested. And I told him I would be. But when were you looking to hire? He said February. And I said, "Well, you're going to figure this out, but I'm going to be 9 months pregnant in February." Thinking I'll hear a click on the other end of the phone. And he's like, "That's not going to be a problem." So I went into interview. He opened the double door so I could slide through because I was big as a house. And he ended up hiring me. And I started there after I delivered my second child. And that was how we started our relationship. And so as we went through, AB was incredibly, and I use the word a lot, intentional about the opportunities that he gave me. My first project was one for our board of directors, and actually looking on stock option backdating. I think part of that was if it didn't turn out well, it was on me and not him. And so that was a great project for me, for the new kid. So obviously everything worked out fine, but it was about, it was something that would be very visible. That's something that would get the attention of the C-suite of the board right out of the gate. But it was also something that would give me an opportunity to shine if I wanted to, and work with people that normally I wouldn't rub elbows with just coming into an organization at that level. And, again, that's like the performance, the exposure, all of those things. I think AB was very intentional. I don't think I realized it when it was happening, but in retrospect, I saw more and more of those things. I thought it was just like, "Here you go, Mary, you need to do this." But because, I'm a farm kid from Kentucky, so I was not sophisticated in all of these things. But I do know that there was a method, a very purposeful method in what AB was doing for me that really put me on the path for success that I probably would never have been able to navigate on my own. And having someone that was championing that, thinking of that for me, was a huge difference in what I was able to accomplish with his assistance and with people that were able then to just help me along the way.
Thanks, Mary. It just brings back great memories. I remember you coming in for the formal interview. It was colder. It was a colder time of year, and so you had a winter coat on that at the time, for obvious reasons, didn't fit too well.
Nothing fit too well.
And nothing would fit that. That was a memorable time, and you're right. I was very purposeful, intentional, maybe not as transparent as I should have been, but I was learning to be a GC myself at that time, right? And I just knew that I needed to create more people that could handle more things, interfacing with executives and the board, simply because I needed to expand bandwidth, because I'm only one person, and we need a lot of these things require a lot of time and effort. So thanks for sharing that story. I do want to, did I get that right? Did I hire you as the Associate General Counsel? And why don't you just take a moment to kind of talk about, because you ended up being the Deputy General Counsel, Corporate Secretary, at the Senior Vice President level when you finally departed there.
Yeah, so I started in 2006 at the Associate GC level. we ended up splitting the company, the EW Scripps company, which is a publicly traded company, into a separate publicly traded company. And we spun off the networks. And most people are not necessarily familiar with who Scripps was, but we owned HGTV, Food Network. At that time, we had not yet acquired Travel Channel, but we had, I think, 6 cable networks, but HGTV Food would be the most prominent. And so we decided to spin those networks off into a separately publicly traded company. So at the time, we were then dividing up who's going to be staying with which organization. You, of course, were going to go with the Scripps Networks entities, as was the CEO, the CFO. I had only done work really for the networks. So you asked me to go and be the deputy GC for you, and also the assistant corporate secretary. And I remember very vividly saying to you, I don't know anything about being the assistant corporate secretary with all the securities and filings. And you're like, that's okay. I'm going to be the corporate secretary. And if anything goes wrong, it'll be on me, but you're going to be doing all the work. And so it was, I was terrified because obviously there's not a lot of, there's no room for error in the SEC filings, but it was, again, yet another opportunity to be in the boardroom, which I had not had the opportunity to do, to work with the directors, to see how that process works, to work with the CEO, the CFO, and be part of those discussions, the prep, and just to interact with people that I normally would not have the opportunity to interact with. And I learned as much about the business, about how to deal with different people, different styles. And I think that was one of the most valuable things that happened to me at Scripps, is that I have been able to take at the other jobs that I have had and use, as far as just understanding how to, I would say, finesse sometimes, and understand how you have to be able to work with different people and what you're trying to accomplish, and understand the different personalities, the different styles, and how incredibly important that is to accomplish your objective. And so that was how that worked. When you left, we had another GC who came in, and then I eventually was named the corporate secretary of the company, which was so funny because when that was made official, all the directors were like, what do you mean we're electing you the corporate secretary? You've been the corporate secretary since 2008. And I'm like, well, I've been doing all the work since 2008. But we finally got it papered and official. So, but that was just, it was an incredible opportunity.
Thanks, Mary. We'll come back. There's more stories that I'd like you to comment on, but Shante, we'll turn to you. So when I arrived at Emergent Biosolutions in 2013, you were already there, as you mentioned earlier to the audience, and you were pretty well established. I think they brought you on to do M&A work. Please share with folks, what are some of the things that helped you, put you where you are today, to accelerate your advancement and led to you becoming, and you alluded to this earlier, but you became the GC of the spinoff company. In 2015, we spun off from Emergent Biosolutions, a company called Aptivo Therapeutics, again in 2015. But obviously that doesn't necessarily automatically happen, right? The one common thing you often see is maybe they'll put on the spinoff, they'll put an acting person with the idea that they're going to put that out for search and bring somebody new, and not just the CLO role, but also potential other C-suite roles, because as you split companies up, certain executives go here, certain executive goes, and you have to fill in gaps. But that wasn't the case with you. I remember the discussions I had with the board and the CEO and the prospective new CEO, and I have to say they were the most uplifting to me, because I was your boss at the time, and it was just one of these things where, yes, this is exactly how it can work, should work, if a company has good professional development, if we're advocating for people to grow within a company, it's all about succession planning. But Shante, why don't you give your version of the story, which may be very different than mine, but go ahead, please.
Yeah, so my version of the story kind of aligns really nicely with this pie: performance, image, and exposure. I had, performance is kind of the table stakes, right? That you need to, do your job well. Um, Exposure is really important, and it was really important in my story too, because I was taking on projects that got me exposure, whether they were interesting or whether they were sexy. I would try to be intentional about taking on projects that would get me in front of the executive team so that they could see me, in action, if you will, and I could develop relationships with them. Because one of the critical things that I had learned and that AB stressed with us was kind of this relationship building. And then that ties to the image that, people seeing me as a leader within the organization, and me working and him talking to all of us in the group, me in particular, about, developing my leadership style. The leadership is not just about doing work and about managing, but it's about gravitas, that horrible word that didn't mean anything to me until, later in my career, in terms of what it meant. But, developing a real leadership style and a real leadership brand, and people seeing you as, more than just a subject matter expert, but a leader. It also, he also encouraged me to build relationships across the organization. And I, was the assistant secretary, and I was sitting in on those meetings. And so he encouraged me to develop relationships with the board. And, one of the members of the board with whom I built a relationship, Marvin White, it so happens they decided to name him the CEO of this new spinoff company. And I was sitting in the boardroom thinking, oh, wow, this could be really interesting for me. Because not only was I building relationships and getting mentorships, with people across the business, but, I had decided maybe a year before that I wanted mentors, and I wasn't going to wait for somebody to decide to be my mentor. I actually affirmatively asked people to be my mentor. And so one of those people was AB, obviously, because he was my boss, and he was, ready and willing to serve as my mentor. But I asked a few other people across the organization on the senior executive team who I thought were good leaders, whether they would be my mentors. And one of those people was Marvin White, who was sitting on the board. Asked him if he would be my mentor, and he said yes. And so again, I'm sitting in this board meeting, and they say, we're about to spin off this company, and we think Marvin should be the CEO. And I thought, oh, wow, okay, this could be a good thing for me. And so fast forward a couple of months, I was kind of sitting, and I had a conversation with AB saying, I'm really interested in this. How do we make this happen? AB and I had a professional development plan. He knew I was interested in being a general counsel. And so I, went to him and say, okay, what's the strategy here? How do I get considered? And I didn't think I wasn't on the short list. And so he said, well, let me handle this, and we'll talk about this, and we'll keep talking about it. The other fact is that I've too recently had found out that I was expecting. And so I was thinking, okay, how is this going to play into people's assessment on whether or not I should go with this spinoff company? And again, AB said, well, let me handle this. And so AB had some conversations apparently, but it was helpful that, I had been sitting in the boardroom. So all the people knew me. All of the characters who were going to be opining as to this decision knew who I was, had worked with me. I had established relationships before, and they also knew about my performance. And so all of the stars aligned in a really beautiful way. And so when I had the conversation with Marvin, he said, I'm going to take a chance on you because I know you, I know how you work. I know that you know how to do this work. And he was invested in my success as well because he was my mentor. And so it all worked out really well, because of all of the factors that have been outlined.
Yeah, Shante, you say stars align, and I guess that's the storybook, but you and I know that you got to make the stars align.
Absolutely. So yeah, I had been working very intentionally, under the direction and advice of a number of people, including AB, to kind of make sure that I had all the boxes, right? So when the opportunity arose, that all of the boxes have been checked to make it, I don't want to say easy, but make my candidacy not ridiculous, right? And so people could take me seriously because they knew who I was, they knew my work product. They knew I had performed. They knew I could lead, and that I could be a contributor across the organization, not just in legal. And so, yeah, it was a hard work and intention. For me, it was definitely intentional work on my part.
Yeah, and it really was about a purposeful investment and in people, and that's always an exciting thing, as I mentioned earlier. I mean, including we left nothing. I don't think we left anything to chance. I mean, I had learned obviously from being a GC, for some time. By the time I met you, that no, you need to kind of hit all switches ideally. To make it happen. In your description of things, you just highlighted several of these lessons learned, but one about relationships. The best professional relationships are those that are established and nurtured at a positive personal level. And so we always worked on that. You talk about leadership. Use every opportunity to demonstrate your leadership abilities. And then you talked about kind of presence and profile and presence, as I call it. The presence you create is the presence you command. All that stuff's important. I'm glad you highlighted that. There is some value to the lessons that we learned. Mary, I do want to get to the fourth question, but I do think it's also important. I talked about kind of, community involvement. Both of you have found that to be important, fulfilling parts of your lives, personal or professional. But I always emphasize that when I moved to Cincinnati, especially being frankly, a person of color moving to Cincinnati, just north of Kentucky, I found the best way to make sure that, the community received me and my family well was get involved in the, so I think there was one time where I was being asked to join boards, and I got one invitation to join the Cincinnati Ballet Board. And I said, you know what, I'm on the symphony board. And I think I came to you, Mary. I said, you should consider this. And I think you're still and one of the sustaining trustees at the ballet. But why don't we talk a little bit about that, because it rounds out who you are as a person, and who you are as a leader, and who you are as someone who frankly is a good face and persona for representing the organization you work for.
Yeah, there's so many aspects to being involved in community entities. And so that is exactly what happened. You'd received the invitation and wanted to know if I'd be interested, because I think you knew that I actually would go to some of the ballets. So I went and met, and I did realize, I don't think, again, not having been involved in a nonprofit of that magnitude, did I understand the value that would come from that. Not only just personally having an enjoyment in something like that, but the networking opportunities for me as an employee of the Scripps organization. But it was great PR for Scripps to be involved in those things. But it also gave me inroads to meeting people that I normally would not as well. So you had people from all walks of life involved in those things, or different aspects of Cincinnati that I just normally would not have crossed paths with, from different industries, different roles. And it's something that I've been doing. I guess that was in 2009, 8 or 9. When I joined that. So it's been, 12 years ago now. Wow. And so it's something, and I got to work with, the people at the ballet, which was awesome. And then I get involved in fundraising, and you develop a lot of different skills that I just had never done before. And then you get asked to be involved in other things, and you get included in other events that do benefit the community in which you are a part of. And I do think as a leader in the community, you do have an obligation and responsibility to give back to the communities in which you live and serve. And I think that you as a leader, the organizations that are here, I think that that's so important to continue to fund and to support the things that are viable organizations that really do depend on the membership and the community. So it was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mary. When I was back in Cincinnati, one of the things I did was I took part in what's called Leadership Cincinnati. Most big cities have that, and I tell you that network is still active. So many years later, I still tap into and have good friends who were my classmates as Leadership Cincinnati. But I turned to you, Shante, because when we were in the DC area, I think that's the way that I think you came to me with this suggestion. I said, absolutely, wrote the recommendation, and you were in. I don't know how that network is, you decided to move to the other Washington. So I don't know how it's worked for you, but why don't you take a moment, and it doesn't have to be about leadership DC, but it can be about, I know you're very active in your alma mater, Stanford, and the women's leadership and stuff like that. But take a minute to talk about that, and then we'll move on to the other question I wanted to hit.
Yeah, I think one of the things that was stressed was that, building relationships within your organization is not enough, that you need to be building relationships outside of your organization as well. And I, like Mary, also believe that, it's really important to be giving back to your community in some kind of way. I did do the leadership Greater Washington. I was a member of the class of 16, and I just so happened to join that class, and then we now suspend, and so I was leaving. But I do stay in touch with the people who are in my class. In fact, I just emailed somebody last week to ask him some advice on some matters. But I've kind of taken the philosophy forward, and so when we moved to Seattle, after getting acclimated and getting settled in, I was looking for opportunities to give back to the community and to join organizations that were doing important and interesting things. And join the boards of the Arts Funds, which is an organization that supports the arts within Seattle, but also had a recent strategic mission of increasing the diversity and their diversity offerings within the arts community in Seattle, which I found to be extremely important given the lack of diversity in Seattle. And then I also joined the board of the Urban League because they were doing some really important work in the community, supporting, low-income people, supporting people of color, particularly in downtown Seattle, who were having a difficult time to actually afford living in Seattle. And so I found that really rewarding and really interesting. But it also, to your point, Mary, puts you in connection with all kinds of people who you wouldn't ordinarily connect with, which can be valuable for your career, I have found. Since moving here to the Bay, similarly have been looking for opportunities to get involved in something. And very recently, an organization called Life Sciences Cares, an affiliate of it, started here in the Bay. And they reached out to my organization, to my CEO, and my CEO said, "Are you interested in doing this? Because I'm also leading diversity and inclusion here at Sogenics." And I said, "For sure, absolutely, I'm totally interested." And so I'm now the vice chair of this organization, whose mission is to provide, to harness the collective brain power and knowledge and money of life sciences companies in the Bay Area to do good. Whether it's STEM education or feeding the homeless or creating opportunities, there's a lot of resources and money here, and we're trying to harness it and deploy it in really impactful ways. But it just so happens that there's some really interesting people who are on this leadership team of Life Sciences Cares. And so it's putting me, again, in connection with folks who I absolutely would not have connections with, but for being on this organization. And so it's doing great work, and I'm super proud of what we're doing. And it was things that I wanted to do anyway, and I wanted Sogenics to be a part of, particularly as a member of the East Bay and Oakland, where there's lots of opportunity to help. But it's also an opportunity. It is also presenting me with a really cool chance to meet folks and expand my networks in a way I couldn't have done it on my own.
Yeah, that's all good. It's really good stuff, and it's amazing the people you meet through other things, and you never know. You build bridges because you never know. You're probably going to cross that bridge at some point, and you'll have another ally or friend or someone that you can talk to. So thanks for both of you for sharing that. So let's quickly move in, because we do want to try to answer questions if we can, but I from the audience. But there is one other topic, the final topic, that being the indispensable teammate. We all work very hard to get into the that inner circle and to be one of the team members, and to be that trusted friend, that loyal friend to the C-suite, to board members, and so forth. But the unique thing about our roles is we're the top lawyer for the company, and so it can find its limits simply because it's we're used to changing hats, right? Legal hat, business hat, interchangeably, but there can be some times where it's challenged. So I just want Shante, tell us how you've gone about to achieve being that indispensable teammate to your teammates, and maybe comment if that has ever been strained in some way, where your ethical or regulatory obligations have said, timeout. I need to push back or hold back. You may not have that experience, but if you do, please share it with us.
Yeah, I would say, one of the huge things that I learned working with AB is this indispensable teammate concept, particularly within the legal affairs group, because he joined us and became our leader when we were a very dysfunctional team. And at the end of, my tenure, under AP, he had, got us into shape. And, I certainly was thinking more about, my colleagues within legal as team members as opposed to enemies. And so it was a very valuable lesson that I learned about, mind over matter. And if, we are all a team members. And so if you don't like each other, figure it out. But in terms of, outside of legal, for sure, I think thankfully I have not been faced with a kind of showdown situation where I had to, stand up for some ethical or some compliance issue in the face of others. And I think part of the reason was because the philosophy that I had operated under was this relationship building philosophy as well, right? And so the goal was to get in there with as the legal affairs business partner, if you will, and get in there early so that you could provide some advice and kind of help to guide the direction in which people were going. And so I didn't come in at the end and have to tell them no or have to fight with them, but I could be in the trenches with them at the beginning to kind of shape the direction that they were going. And our relationship was such where I could say, or they were comfortable with me saying, yeah, this isn't going to work. This is not the appropriate way for us to go. We should go in a different direction. There have been times when I was a more junior lawyer on the team and there were some more senior people who wanted to do things a particular way. And in those instances, I had to call in some, bigger guns, i.e., law firms like Covington to say, you just can't do this. And that was a good quiver that I had that helped. And you just have to be political and figure out who are the people that need to be in the room to hear that response, so that the person who is giving you challenge is sufficiently, there are others in the room who could help you to push them in the direction that you should be going. That is the correct direction as opposed to a challenging ethical direction. So a lot of it is massaging and political and relationships.
Thank you, Shante. Mary, how about you?
Yeah, I think it's really important. Again, I think relationships, you can't overemphasize that enough in everything that you do. And the longer that I'm in in-house legal role, the more critical I have seen that to be. I think if you do have open, honest, transparent communication and you have that level of trust, it goes a long way to eliminate many of these issues. I do think, to your point, AB, that we are in a very unusual role where we do have an ethical obligation as lawyers that we must always keep in the forefront of everything and every decision that we make. So it's really hard if you are in a position where you are faced with a challenge that this is what we must do. And I have been in situations where, this is right, this is wrong, and what am I going to do about it? And so I think if you're in those situations, you have to be prepared to make the decision as to what you are going to be willing to do and what decisions you're going to be willing to make if you are faced with a truly ethical dilemma about, can you do that as a lawyer? And it's very challenging if you find yourself in that spot. But there are some times where you've been in it, when I've been in a spot and I'm like, hey, I didn't write the law. This is what it requires. And I've had people, back down from that. They may not like it, but I'm not here to win a popularity contest. I'm here as the lawyer for the organization. I represent the shareholders, the company. I'm not anyone's personal lawyer. I think educating people as to what I'm doing and why, enlisting the assistance if you need an outside counsel so that it doesn't become a standoff between one person's opinion versus the legal counsel is also helpful. But if it comes down to the decision is going to be made that is completely contrary to what is legally required or ethically required, then you may find yourself in a position that you have to make a hard call for you personally and professionally.
No, thank you for that. I think it's really important. It's not that you go into a building anticipating that we're into a new role, but I think it is important because we are lawyers and we do have certain professional obligations, and it raises another lessons learned from my list. And I know you guys have heard this before, but never compromise your own core values of character and integrity, honesty, ethics, faith, and family, because ultimately that's your real legacy as a person, not your job title, right? And not the prestige of being a GC. So I know I didn't quite manage the time quite as well, but it was a great discussion. I see Bob's back on. I don't know, Bob, I can stretch a little bit in terms of time if you'd like. But thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Shante.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. And yeah, if we have, if you want to just try and answer a couple questions, do you want me to read them off to you, or?
Yeah,
Okay, so the first question was, how do you encourage someone to want to sponsor you?
Well, Shante actually kind of answered that, hopefully, but there's different approaches, but Shante described one. Shante, why don't you take that up and elaborate on how you went about making sure that you had advocates and sponsors within the company?
Yeah, I did not want to wait for somebody to decide to do it. And so I just asked. I look around the organization for people who I thought were good leaders and who did good work and who I thought could teach me something. And so I went up to them and I asked, would you, be willing to be my mentor / sponsor? And then the onus was on me to kind of keep that relationship going, which I knew that at the outset. But I got some very good reception. Nobody told me no, and everybody took my calls, and everybody would schedule a meeting whenever I wanted to. So yeah, I would encourage you to just ask.
Mary?
Yeah, I'm a big believer, obviously, in just asking. I'm cold call. I mean, obviously, the worst thing that people can do is say no. And it's worked out incredibly well for me. My career would not be what it is without one cold call to A.B. Cruz. So I'm a living testament to taking a chance. And but along those lines, if you find someone, I think building relationships with people first, as opposed to going up to necessarily a stranger and asking for that, because it's hard to mentor someone that you don't have anything in common with. So if you have some type of if you've developed some type of a relationship, because you may find out you may not want them to be your mentor. You may not have the same type of philosophies or viewpoints. And so I think it's really important to explore relationships with people before you want someone to be your mentor.
Thank you.
And,
Bob, another question?
Yeah, and it's similar to what I think Mary talked about earlier, but how do you get up to speed on areas that you're not familiar with?
Oh yeah, that's obviously we've been, I think each of us to some point have been in different industries and so forth. I certainly have some thoughts. You can obviously learn a lot by doing your research ahead of time, but getting involved in strategic planning process, understanding what's the vision of the company, where it's heading, getting involved in the M&A team or the BD team, because you find out about the industry, you find out about your competitors, the competitive landscape, that type of thing. Mary, we'll go to you if there's other ways that you learned.
Yeah, I mean, I surround myself with people that are a lot smarter than I am on the topics that I want to learn. So whether that be with outside counsel, for example, here, one of my connections and the friends that I made in Minneapolis, she recommended me to be part of the Women in Healthcare group so that I can get connected with people that are in this area, because I do not have a background in healthcare law. And here I am, the chief legal officer of this organization. So being able to partner with people that can be a resource on some of the topics, I think is critical. So you have to engage and find areas that can be resources for you, whether it be outside counsel or other practitioners in that area, but then also go to your business leaders in your company, because that's critical to understand your company. And every place you go, if you do not do that, you are making a huge misstep by not understanding the business in which you're working, your specific business.
Shantae?
Yeah, I agree with all of those things. Outside counsel are great. A lot of times your outside counsel will provide their time pro bono to give you a tutorial on whatever. I recently taken advantage of that in certain areas of the law. And then also in technical areas, I have sat down, for example, we were a biologics manufacturer at Aptivo. And so I would sit down with my manufacturing folks and I would ask them to explain to me what they do and how they do it. And what does upstream and downstream biologics manufacturing mean? And not only does it help you with relationships, too, people love to talk about what they do. And so, they're a great resource for you to learn just even the basics of, the business and how you actually effectuate parts of the business.
Yeah, that's good advice. Bob,
Great.
anything else?
Well, I think we're just actually just gone over the hour slot. So I just want to thank AB, Shantae, and Mary for all of your time today and sharing your insights. I think what we heard a lot of is it's reaching out to those who can help you in some way. Obviously, we're available, AB and others on the team, whether you need to recruit somebody to fill a hole in the organization, if you're looking for some leadership development, some coaching, succession planning, or you're just looking to improve your law department or compliance department in some way. We've got a team of in-house professionals that can really help support you in all those different areas. So again, thank you, for the panelists today for you joining us, and we look forward to having you join us again on future GC Advantage programs. Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.
Have a good
Bye.
day, everybody.